Welcome to the Suncoast In-Depth Podcast. I'm here with Dr. Troy Doucet. I'm Brett Watson, and we're going to talk about the Universal Christ, Chapter 2, titled Accepting That You Are Fully Accepted. So he opens up this chapter, right, with two interesting verses.
Mm-hmm.
The first one is from Revelation 21. It basically says, I'm the first, the last, the Alpha, the Omega. I'm making all things new. See, it's already done. And it's a wild verse, right?
Yeah.
And then he has, from John chapter 8, one of the I am statements, like the series that we did recently, where he says, before Abraham was, I am.
Mm-hmm.
And so then Rohr asks the question, who do you think's speaking here? Is it Jesus of Nazareth or somebody else? It's pretty cool, right?
That's a good question.
Yeah. So if it was Jesus of Nazareth speaking there, then, if you were a Jew living in that day, you would have every obligation to pick up a stone and kill the guy.
Yep.
Right? But if it's the Christ, as Rohr is using the word, basically synonymous with logos,
Mm-hmm.
it's this eternal presence, this person of the triune God, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then verses like this start to make more sense. So, but here again, he's driving home this idea of a distinction between Jesus of Nazareth, the human, and this eternal presence, the Logos, or
Christ Spirit,
or the Christ, right?
Yep.
And it got me to thinking about some of the criticisms that are leveled against Richard Rohr, mostly within popular Christianity,
Mm-hmm.
evangelical Christianity, conservative stuff.
Yep.
That he's just a modern Gnostic.
Yep.
So Gnosticism is not something most Christians really know much about, but Gnosticism, he does have a Gnostic ring to it a little bit. But I would argue that he's not really straying from orthodoxy. Why? Do you agree?
Agreed. Yeah.
Yeah.
He still uses language that is fundamentally rooted in traditional Christianity. I mean,
Okay. Pause.
Yep.
So, traditional Christianity, right? This always bugs me.
Yeah.
Whenever this is said from the pulpit or whatever, we're not traditional Christianity. It bugs me because what do we mean when we say traditional?
Yeah.
Do we mean traditional American popular Christianity or, evangelicalism? Or do we mean truly traditional, historic Christianity?
That would be probably
because the
better
reality is, then we're the traditional ones, right?
That's right.
Much more so than most.
That's what I'm
evangelical
saying.
churches.
Oh, absolutely. I think what we teach at Suncoast obviously aligns a lot with Richard Rohr. I wouldn't say we go all the way with him or the way with
who do we do that with?
Yeah, we that it changes weekly depending on who's speaking. Even what side of Christianity you're gonna get. But I think what we've done is we've done our best to try to sort of erase much of the more, I guess, Western traditions that have attempted to infuse themselves into Christianity that are based on like capitalistic ideals or, socioeconomic sort of theories that try to make Christianity political in a particular way that it's not, right?
Yes.
So when I say traditional, like his language is traditional to the
early church.
The early church, the text itself even.
Yes.
That he's not, trying to recalibrate words to mean something to the American mind that would have been absolutely foreign to those who would have read those texts in the first century, second century.
Yeah.
So
Gnosticism is
and even if you call Rohr Gnostic, my question is, so what?
So what?
Yeah.
Well,
he's a boss, man.
Yeah, definitely. I wouldn't call him a Gnostic though, because where he says things like Jesus died on the cross, but the Christ was raised. he follows that up with, yes, as Jesus, but like Mark says in his gospel in the last chapter, he says he appeared to them, but in another form, right? So, and the other thing is that Rohr he never strays from the importance of physicality in Christian theology.
Right.
That's really what set apart Gnosticism from Christian theology. So, Gnosticism, all matter is like a prison.
Yeah.
Created by this demiurge who had no business creating, but he went rogue and he did it anyway. And, and that's, by the way, that's the God of the Old Testament to them. At least for many of them.
That's right.
So,
that's right.
For them, this is, we're these poor sparks of the true creator, and we're trapped in this physical hellhole.
Yeah.
And it's all about escaping.
Yeah.
And that Jesus is just what's the word I'm looking for? He's like the avatar of the true God, and he comes but he's like a phantom in Gnosticism, right? So when they adopted Jesus Christ into their worldview, Gnostics had him as, the true God infused himself into this Jesus of Nazareth, and so that happened at the baptism.
Yeah,
and then at the crucifixion, that spirit left, and only Jesus of Nazareth died. Right. But but the big difference is Rohr's not taking away from the importance of the material reality as part of the whole reality. He's much more holistic.
Yeah,
and he's traditional that way. He's orthodox, so he's not really espousing a Gnostic view of Jesus.
Yeah, I think you're right. Like the idea is like gnosis. It's more like a type of knowledge, right? A type of understanding. And this is where, people like me come to be highly critical of a type of Gnosticism, of knowledge, that is only based in like an intellectual assent, right? Where you can mask it in Gnosticism as spirituality. Well, dude, there is no escape from incarnationality, right? There's no escape from the fact that most of my understanding and knowledge of the world is based fundamentally on my embodied experience of it, right?
Exactly.
And so I think Rohr toes that line very well, because there also is a realm of intellectualism, right? There is a realm of the mind and the spirit, whatever, the suke, whatever you want to call it. But and again, this has been a debate in philosophy for a long time. Who has the closest thing to objective truth? Is it the rationalists, where everything is empirical and, not empirical, but sort of rational, and we can base ideas on concepts that are innate? Or is it the empirical side, where it's based upon observation and replication and, those tidbits of science? Well, I think a true theology is someone that integrates both of those understandings, where the Gnostics have a piece that I believe is real, right? That is true. And I think those who, like Rohr, who talk about incarnational theology, like the embodied presence of the spiritual within the body. That's how you come to know and experience whatever God is a both and. It's not an either or.
Yeah.
And so to label him simply as Gnosticism is to sort of not consider his other incarnational theological statements or study. So
yeah, agreed. All right, so let's talk about the emphasis in this chapter. So he kind of, reestablishes in the beginning that distinction between the Christ and Jesus. But really, what this chapter is about is, as the title suggests, rather, accepting yourself as being fully accepted by the only one that it ultimately matters, right? And I think that this has real psychological benefit to it. We're fortunate to live in the time that we live in. And he mentions this in this book, actually, because we have all this. Well, it's still developing, but this psychological school of thought, right? And I think that one of the greatest hurdles that people have psychologically is the leap over to a genuine self-love. You think I'm right?
Yeah. Because it gets misconstrued. Like self-love gets misconstrued as a type of arrogance or vanity. And
Yeah, it can be seen as negative and selfish and self-centered, whatever. But that's obviously not what
that's not what he's addressing.
that's not what he means. Yeah. It's accepting yourself. Obviously, this is from a theological standpoint, as someone that God made and loves because God made him.
Yeah.
Right? God made me. He loves me.
Yep.
Period. God loves you.
Yep.
Period, as you're fond of saying. So, accepting this, though, I don't know, for me, I can say that I accept that. I can give that mental assent.
Yep.
But I catch myself a lot struggling with truly loving myself that way, even though cognitively, yeah, I'm God's kid.
Yeah.
I'm good.
Yeah.
He loves me.
But there is, back to the psychology of that sentiment. I believe it's one thing to come to an acceptance of being accepted. But the way I like to say it is, like, God loves you exactly as you are right now.
Mm-hmm.
But loves you too much for you to just simply stay there.
Yeah, loves you too much to leave you there.
Yeah. And so what I would say is something along the lines of, like, self-improvement, self-worth, self-value is something that we can constantly work on. I think mediocrity is often misconstrued in light of like capitalistic ideals or net worth or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But you have a guy say something like, "Hey, Doucet, man, I'm trying to get better at life, dude. But how do I get better, man? I'm doing all these things, man. I got a promotion at work, man. I'm doing this. I'm setting goals."
Mm-hmm.
And I respond going, the goals you set, do they scare you? Do they create a sense of fear? And if you tell me, well, no, then goal ain't big enough. Goal's not big enough then.
Okay.
Like, because if God loves you and you believe you have these abilities that I think are God-given, then I think my love for my children wants the best for them, right? But not to create a vegetable where I make it so easy for them, right?
Yeah.
But the idea is, like, self-love is once I look at myself and I accept that acceptance, but also accept the challenge to go beyond what I'm accepted as, if that makes sense, right? It means,
No, it totally does.
It means to push oneself, right? To push oneself, because even Jesus, dude, is in the garden going, man, there's another way. There's another way. This goal is scaring the hell out of me,
Mm-hmm.
But he pushes through that, man, and gets rewarded. Obviously, dude, there's a reward in suffering too. Learning how to suffer well, even though you are accepted, even though you've come to the understanding that God is always already with and within me. It doesn't give you, and this is what we argue about, like universal salvation. It doesn't give me a license just to freaking drop the ball and quit. If anything, it impassions me to go further, right?
Yeah, and you got to think that if it's a genuine belief,
Oh, yeah.
that's going to motivate. It's not going to demotivate.
Oh, absolutely, dude. So when I think about the love of God, dude, and how that it is universal, and that the work of Christ, whatever that was not to be a substitute, but to be I'm trying to think of a cool word that goes with substitute. It wasn't a substitution. It was to show, like, this idea of sacrifice and death and hell.
Yeah.
Like, even if you take Jesus's death as some sort of atonement type approach, then it's got to be good enough for everyone. Then it has to be fulfilled for everyone. And that even in that in itself, which closely mirrors evangelical theology, but on a heretical view of what the atonement was, that it's universal for all people, then that motivates me even more to go like, what Jesus did accomplished it for everyone. Like, that's it. And that doesn't motivate me, well, now I can go have sex with as many women as I want. Right now I can go hurt as many people because I'm fully accepted. No, it motivates me to pull people into this light of truth as opposed to the fear of this darkness of some impending doom beyond this life, man.
Yeah, me too.
So I don't know.
Absolutely.
That was a rant to simply say, just because you're accepted doesn't mean you have to just stay in that starting position, right? Being accepted is not the end. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Understanding that's not the end.
Yeah, but being accepted is a much better launch pad for growing.
Yeah.
Right? For taking off from where I am than a launch pad that's crumbling under the weight of, criticism and a judgmental, condemnatory eye.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's been my experience too. I became far more motivated by love to serve others than I did by the idea that this is some kind of legal obligation or some rescue attempt on my part.
Yeah.
And I went through all that.
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know. I got to save these people. I got to save at least how many people per day? I mean, my God, I should spend all my time doing this.
Yeah,
They're
yeah.
going to burn in hell for eternity.
Dude,
they're going to eternal torment. Like you said Sunday, you said 100 billion years, and in my mind I said, and that's just the beginning.
That's it.
Right?
That's day one.
It's completely absurd. I don't know.
Dude,
We're off on universalism, but that's a hot topic too.
But I think it fits though, right?
It
the
does,
idea is what's contrary to universalism is that there's this contradictory view of God that you are loved and accepted, but now burn. Like who does that, right? George Carlin, the comedian, he's like these preachers, they go around, God just walks around, I forgot how he sets it up, but he's like, if you don't believe in me, if you don't trust in me, if you don't give me your money, you will burn forever and ever and ever and ever in a hell of fire and torment and brimstone. But I love you,
Yes. Yeah.
So there seems to be a contradiction of what to be accepted is, and so
Absolutely.
yeah, man.
Yeah. So this idea, though, I think is you think this is like what he's providing here to me seems like a bridge for a lot of people, right? So if you're like a Carlin, all right, and you look at this and you go, how absurd is this? You love them, you made them, you foreknew what their choices would be, and then you just burn them for eternity.
Yeah. For being bad.
That's just so absurd. So guys like Carlin and so many others, they just can't buy that.
Yeah.
But what Rohr does with this concept of this universal Christ, that everything that Jesus is just a manifestation of this Christ arising from this Christ-soaked creation, right? Then you can imagine a guy like Carlin going, "Now, wait a minute, I can get on board with that.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
I can see that." I just don't know how the church holds on to these absurd things for so long. I really don't.
I don't know, man. I don't know, dude. I look at Jesus as a very dangerous man, right? And I think I look at Richard Rohr as a dangerous man.
Mm-hmm.
And I look at Dr. Bauckham as a dangerous man. And I think even when I think of it that way, like these ideas that you're putting out there.
He could pull your paycheck like right now.
Oh, yeah, man. And I'm done.
Over.
It's done.
Yeah.
Got to go back to
dangerous.
Texas. But I think that it even answers like the whole problem of evil, right? The whole problem of evil is how could a good God allow suffering when there seems to be something innate about the possibility of evil as being a necessary formula.
Yeah.
Because, dude, I don't know if it was Peterson who said this, but dude, some of the most dangerous men in the world are not tyrants. Like, those guys are dangerous. Someone like Putin, whatever, dangerous, right?
Mm-hmm.
Whatever. But that's not who I'm thinking about. I'm thinking of someone who knows they're dangerous, like Bruce Lee. Like, dude's dangerous. You don't mess with Bruce, but he's the most kind, wise dude, but dangerous.
Yes.
The potentiality for him to use that danger for evil, astronomical.
It's there.
Yeah, it's there. But you think of it in a way that's counterintuitive, right? Dangerous, really dangerous men use that element of danger for good, you know? Like, dude, I'm not breaking in Bruce Lee's house, you know? Because that's when his danger meets my evil and the good danger beats the bad evil or something like that. With these ideas like we teach here at Suncoast, or what Roar's teaching in here, are very dangerous to those people who have used the good news for evil, right? Which I would consider even more dangerous, because you have people who are just simply blindly imposing this idea on other people. You're not good enough. You need to do this in order to be accepted. You need to do this in order to be in. You need to say this prayer in order to be saved. And like that, those are dangerous ideals. Not just to the person who they're trying to impose it to.
No.
But it's dangerous to those people who are looking at that going, screw that.
Yeah.
And they will live the rest of their life not knowing this full, incalculable love of God that is not coming from somewhere else, like the sunshine shining on them, but is available to be within them. Like, that's dangerous, dude, to tell someone God is always already with and in you. Like, that's a dangerous person, dude, who lives in that type of self-love. That's not arrogant. That's not vile. That's not vain. That's not selfish, but just freaking dangerous, because you're going to awaken other people to that. And think of what kind of world that would be, man, where we all just recognized, you know.
It'd be the kingdom of heaven.
Yeah.
On earth.
That's it.
Which was Jesus' whole mission.
Yeah.
And you can imagine that, you know, as the Christ is speaking in Revelation, he says, "See, I have made all things new. It's already done."
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was kind of, you could look at it as it was inaugurated in Jesus the Christ, you know.
Mm-hmm.
I guess you could even look further back than him, though, right?
Oh, yeah.
You can see the Spirit of Christ operative in the world. Like Roar says, what about all the Neanderthals? Were they just practice, you know, like they didn't matter, you know? Were they just soulless beasts? You know? I think not, you know?
Yeah.
So the Spirit of Christ is operative. Who knows why Jesus the Christ came when he did, or emerged when he did? Who knows? We talked about that some the other day, you know, last week, I think. But he did, and he becomes this focal point, I think, for history, where that you can begin to see yourself differently by looking at him. Mm-hmm. So Roar puts it this way. He says, we begin to see like Christ when we see Christ.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a difference between seeing and recognizing.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, you begin to see, you learn to see when you look at Jesus the Christ.
Yeah.
And it's kind of a proximity thing, like we were talking about, right? That it makes God more relevant when, and it gets into this, what I call this Me Too Christology, right?
Yeah.
Like, wow, if that really is true, if the eternal presence, divine presence, is manifest in Jesus of Nazareth, me too.
Me too.
What's my potential?
Yeah, yeah.
You know? So I think it's important stuff that, and a really big takeaway that Christianity offers the world by espousing this idea that Jesus somehow, some way, is this God being human.
Yeah.
So, a couple more things in here
Yeah.
that I wanted to talk about. So the seeing and recognizing not being the same thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
This he relates to, like I would say it's almost like a branch of incarnational theology, but it's called sacramental theology. And I guess the distinction there is that there's always something physical there. Again, he's emphasizing the importance of physicality that becomes the conduit for seeing the divine in the ordinary.
Yeah.
So all the sacraments of the Roman Church have physical elements involved, you know. And communion, and this gives me a different view. Let's see if you agree with me. When we say, when Roman Catholics say the real presence of Christ is in the elements. Well, if you hold a view like Rohr's that, so does this table.
Yep.
So all right. That bread, it's got the real presence.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not going to go so far as to try to define that and prove it scientifically that, this becomes skin, once I swallow it by faith, But yeah,
I think
real presence.
I think that's right. I'm not trying to ingest this table either.
No.
So there is an element of, the eating the elements of it. But it's funny. I got into not a debate, but a family member who was being very harsh against the Catholics online about prayer and why do we pray to these saints and this and that. And I simply asked a question. I said, "What's wrong with it?" Well, there's no blah 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 in the Bible. There's no praying to Saint Mark for protection. And I went, I remember you asking me to pray for you for
bingo.
For healing, or for your cousin, whatever. What good am I? That's just as good as asking one of the saints who've gone before. Like, it's the same thing, man. And it completely changed how they view it. And in the same way, if we look at the elements of like the sacramental modes of baptism or whatever, the Eucharist, it's the same way. There's really a practical application to understanding that theology that when you really think about it, there are elements of the Christ spirit in all things, including this bread and this wine, or even grape juice or the Oreo cookies if you do it that way, whatever you do. So in the same way, if I'm asking a saint to pray for me, it's no different than asking, Saint Brett Watson to pray for me,
Yeah.
So.
And we do that all the time.
All the time.
Yeah. Or what's the difference between that and me asking you to help me move from one house to the other?
Yeah.
You're just talking to a friend, right?
Yep.
Yeah. I even in my most fundamentalist days, I had no issue with that.
Yep.
I could see, well, really what they mean is, you're just asking a friend for some help, All right, so that's kind of the sacramental theology. I think it's such a beautiful way to look at the world, right? Again, I went on a walk this morning when I got here, and I could take that time and look at everything differently.
Yeah.
To try to see like God sees. So when I walked through the spider web, I didn't cuss. I really did.
Yeah.
Normally you go, but man, what an amazing thing, Spider webs are amazing.
Yeah.
Spiders are amazing.
But what do you do when you see the praying mantis just nibble on a wasp as it's still alive and just
it's a good question, man.
Consumes it as the wasp is reeling in pain and the praying mantis is just there steadily.
Yeah.
conscientiously, meticulously.
Yeah.
And the wasp is.
Yeah, that's kind of a nightmare right there. Thanks for that. But I took a picture of a praying mantis like 4 weeks ago, right? I'm walking here on the campus.
Yeah.
And I walk by, and there's this praying mantis sitting there, and I look down and I go, "Hey, buddy." And he turns his head like this, like my dog or something, looking at me like I'm having a conversation with a praying mantis, But just wild,
He's like,
that.
Got any wasp on you, buddy?
Yeah, I got one in my pocket. But
it's a true story, man. Last night, Diesel, our dog, we have a min pin. Like, dude, this dude, I don't know, around 7 o'clock, he is cranked up, just happy. Like that's his time. And he's jumping on the couch and he's like,
yeah, we call that the zoomies.
Yeah, he's smiling, dude. His tongue's out. He obviously wants a treat. We get him a treat, but he comes like and he puts his paw on my leg. Like he's like tapping me, looking at me. And I'm like, Diesel, where's God? And dude, as sure as I'm sitting here, he looks at me and he stops and he goes,
No way.
I swear to God, he goes,
no way.
I swear to, and I told Esther, I was like, oh my God, did you see that? She's like, what? I said, I just looked at him and I was like, Diesel. And he's like, I was like, where's God? And he went, just like that, dude. I was like, oh my, it freaked me out, dude. It freaked me out. Now, of course, I'm going to try to explain it away with some sort of,
whatever.
But that was super creepy,
It still had a real effect on you,
Oh,
though.
it did. I was like, what?
Yeah.
But anyway.
Well, I had a story that just came to mind. Another Joseph story. I got tons of Joseph stories, Before we adopted him, I was really super opposed to adopting again. We had already adopted Ben and Christine, and Ben was little, and I was tight with him, and I thought, if we bring another child in, how's that going to affect him?
Yeah.
And long story, but I'll just shorten it up and say one of the times that I was thinking and praying about it, I just said, Lord, I'm afraid of what it'll take away from Ben, And, you get that strong impression on your heart of an answer, right? And that answer was, you don't have to be afraid, Brett. I'm just coming to be with you in ways you haven't known me yet. And that's kind of what this whole incarnational thing is, right? So I've told Joseph, I've told him that story, and I said, and he really did come to live with me in ways I never knew him before.
Yeah, man.
And he did that through you.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's pretty awesome, right?
It is.
So, this chapter is focused on not only accepting that incarnational notion of life or that worldview, but it's also recognizing that you are part of that. You are this fully accepted piece of God.
Mm-hmm.
And I just think that this has so much potential for healing, Like Joseph as an example, I mean, he has, disabilities and deficiencies and whatever, but man, I just see so many adopted kids with massive issues that way. And I just wonder if Joseph's mental health is how much it's been helped by this idea that I've, really driven home with him, and that developed so much in the real for me through that experience of being his dad. Wonder how much of that helped him to see himself as valued and loved,
Yeah, man. It's huge.
It's hard to know yourself if you don't know God.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people would say you really can't.
Yeah.
And if we're embracing this worldview, this incarnational worldview, then accepting myself is super important
Yeah.
for living into that incarnational reality.
Yeah, man.
If I don't accept myself in a very real sense, I'm not accepting God.
Yeah.
You know where Jesus says, if you forgive, then the Father will forgive you.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't forgive, then neither will your Father forgive you.
Yeah.
I mean, that seems harsh, dude.
I
right?
know where you're going with that. Yeah,
but
yeah.
but if you hold this incarnational view of things, then it's kind of like, yeah, you won't be forgiven because you won't forgive yourself.
Yeah.
If you can't forgive them, you're going to hold that against yourself too. So yes, in a very real sense, that is the Father not forgiving you.
Yep.
And in a very real way, that's because you won't have it.
Yep.
And in another real way, it's because you won't give it to yourself.
Yep.
You know, it's all tied together.
Yeah.
So anyway, just a thought, a tangent.
Oh, that's really good, man.
But I think that's a good way to interpret those texts, you know. So, all right, let's close talking about enlightenment. So Rohr's Christianity shares a lot with traditional orthodoxy. And what I think a lot of Christians don't realize is that traditional orthodoxy shares a lot of perennial philosophies with other faiths.
Mm-hmm.
Enlightenment is one of them.
Yep.
Most Christians that I know don't think of Christianity and enlightenment at the same time.
Mm-mm.
They think of Buddhism and enlightenment. They think of Hinduism, maybe. Maybe they go to yoga, and so and they've heard this term and ideas around it. But in Christianity, you just don't hear much about it. But I think that's a bummer, man.
Yeah.
Because Christianity does share that
Yep.
with other faiths. And when you think, John says that Jesus is the light to all the world. Light, something that we see other things by, right?
Yep.
That this Christ, it's all about enlightenment is what I'm getting at. It's all about enlightenment. It's all about awakening to the truth of who you are.
Yeah,
And becoming, therefore, something different.
yeah.
Because you're awakening through this darkness, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're in this life journey where you were talking about suffering before.
Yeah.
It seems like a necessary component in this process, so that as C.S. Lewis said, there must be something better about a fallen and redeemed world than a world that never fell to begin with, right?
Yeah.
So yes, I am this piece of God. I am this. I am a part of this Christ-soaked reality, but I'm also a piece of it that has been given amnesia, and I've forgotten that. I've forgotten what I am.
Yeah.
But I'm remembering.
Yeah.
Right? Amnesis. I'm remembering.
Yep.
And as I remember more and more, I'm becoming something that I couldn't have been if I had never experienced that amnesia.
Yeah, yeah.
You know?
I think that's a good way to look at it, because the way I always explain like enlightenment, even when I teach humanities or some of the Enlightenment thinkers, light in and of itself is useless. You know, like if I stare at the light and not what the light shows,
right,
then I'm still freaking lost, you know?
Yep.
And too much light, I'm blind. Not enough light, I'm
like
blind.
we did that one Sunday.
That's
when we
right.
blasted everybody with the spotlights. Yeah.
But the light has a utility to it, right? It's to show that which, you know, is not visible. But when you turn a light on, you don't look at the light. You know what I'm saying? And I think where a lot of conservatism in Christianity is, they look at the light and not what the light is trying to establish or show, right?
Yeah. That's good.
And
I like that.
that's the problem, is like it becomes nothing wrong with there being like a Christocentric church or whatever. Jesus is our light. Awesome. What is that light showing you?
Yeah.
Because if it's only showing you this and not what's around, then you're still blind. You can love Jesus and still be blind, dude. And you could know God and still be blind. And that's the problem is there are, Nietzsche talked about these ideas of, these residuals, these nooks and crannies of God being hidden still in the darkness of the light from which God supposedly shines, And I think that's an important element to talk about. It's where can I see God in other things that don't have anything to do with the light that's coming from the God that I hold at this moment, And that's a dangerous idea, because when I begin to see the similarities of something like Buddhism and Christianity, and then people get really, really uncomfortable with that, because I said it Sunday from the stage. I said, it seems as though when we come to understand like this amazing thing that God does for us, this enlightenment, the first thing we want to do is we want to box it off. We want to cover it. We want to exclusivize it. We want to put parameters around it or rules to regulate it. It's not like God's opening up a free buffet and, well, how do we keep up? Well, we got to pay, we got to line, well, we got to start charging a little bit here. Like, that's not what is happening.
That's not the economy of
That's
God.
not the economy of God, dude. And it goes back to something you said earlier, is this notion of, look, man, like your life is still going on. But, bro, if there is a point where God is going to look at you, Brett, and go, well done, like that he'd say that now, if, heaven forbid you go on to by and by today, but he was still like, dude, you made an impact in Christine's life, Ben's life, Joseph's life. Just 3. Perfect. But the economy in which we live in is like, why don't you write that book, bro? Nobody's going to read it. I don't give a shit if 5 people read it. 5 people read it and they go, this is awesome. But everything's so stratified according to numbers, right? And
hierarchies of power.
Oh,
and
dude,
prestige
to be in the top 1% of income earners in the United States, you have to make like $450,000 to be in top 1%.
Mm-hmm.
Like, dude, I don't make anywhere near that. And the moment my child support stops, I'm gonna be like super happy, because that's life changing for me. But the notion is, when you think of like a football player getting, he just signed $255 million contract for 5 years. Like, when we think of economies in that way, then even the person who makes $450,000, top 1%, is like, oh, you're poor. I want that. When in fact, that's not how God works. God's like, I've given you this message. I've given you this idea. Share it. But I'm scared. Good. That lets me know that message is dangerous. But it's probably necessary, because even if it just reaches 5 people, then those 5 people are going to share it. And that's how it works, man. And so I'm sort of preaching to myself.
You're preaching to me too.
Is that we can't reduce it and put parameters around even those things which God has illuminated in our life. To say, oh, well, I can't do that. It's not gonna reach enough people. Who cares? Like, do it. Get out there, do it.
Yeah, and isn't that, I know it is for me at least, I can just speak for myself. Not doing those things has so much to do with not fully accepting that I'm fully accepted.
That's exactly it, dude.
Yeah.
That's good.
So it's important stuff.
Yeah, man.
Thanks for talking about it.
Yeah, man.